gentlemen, welcome to the very first episode of Mic Check with Mr. Anderson. I'm not even going to try it. Maybe I should get a sound button every week for that, unless you feel up to really going, Mr. I won't even try.
I got neighbors. Maybe my neighbors will hate me.
Yeah, fair enough. We're actually so excited to be bringing this episode to everybody because it's been Connor and myself have been lifelong fans. Of course, we've been fans of yours, so there's nothing really that you'll talk about with us that we won't know. And Connor and I are really going to represent the audience at home who have really jumped on this. They've really, since it was announced, people have really, really jumped on this and shown their love and support. What's it been like for you, Ken? Just, you had a great career. You still have a career. You're doing independence. You've got your wrestling school. But then we announced a show and everybody's just showing the love. How's that been for you?
It's nice. And I think we oftentimes as performers wonder, when we go away for a while, we wonder, like, are they going to remember me, or am I going to suck? So really, I started feeling that love with the CVV interview that I did a while back. So yeah, it's great. It's been great to see the messages and the responses. Here we are. I'm really excited about this. Thank you for reaching out to me. And
no more excited than what we are. And by the way, huge thanks to Chris Van Vliet for sharing this and really showing the love. That guy's at the top of his game. Someone I've been watching for years. I think when you go to wrestling interviews and you know CVV's involved, you know you're going to be in for a good time. Another quick thank you as well to Tommy Dreamer and TNA for allowing us to use that badass theme. Confirm it here, that was your favorite wrestling theme ever?
Yeah, for me, actually, it's a toss-up between that and the Aces and Eights music, honestly.
Oh, nice.
But as far as, like, get you in the mood, get ready to beat somebody's face in, that edges out the Aces and Eights song.
Damn, it definitely has a kick to it. We are going to get to the mailbag section, which every week we will chat essentially about what's going on in the wrestling world, and we will take questions from all you lovely people that have subscribed. You can go ahead and follow us on X, you can follow us on Instagram, of course subscribe on YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, everywhere you see Mic Check with Mr. Anderson. Of course, anywhere Ken is, you're already following. Anywhere that we are, go follow, because there's going to be lots of cool stuff coming up. We're going to if you think that this is exciting, wait till you see what we have coming up. We did put a question out, if anybody would like to put a question in for Ken for tonight on the first episode, then we will do a weekly mailbag. I have here a mailbag, and I narrowed it down. If I have not if I have not selected your question, it's purely because, one, we have too many questions, or two, some questions there we actually want to get into, but we're actually going to do it. We're going to get right into it with a great deep dive type episode. So the ones that hadn't, essentially, are the ones that I'm going to ask away. So Ken, I'll start with question one from Graspian, if I've said that right. Ken pulled off a classic Surfer Sting look pretty well in TNA. What was Ken's thoughts on donning the look? Was the costume borrowed from Sting or costume made? And who did the face paint?
That was one of the cooler experiences that I've had in the business. When I was coming up and I would go to TNA as an extra, Road Dogg would often say, like, you remind me of a young Sting. Because I had the bleach blonde hair and I was somewhat jacked at the time. and so then fast forward to, I'm at TNA and I'm told that we're going to get into a program together. And we're passing each other in the hallway, and Sting he's just the greatest guy. He just says, hey, I know we don't know each other well. I just want you to know that I'm open to doing whatever. If you have any ideas of things, shoot them my way. And, I'm open to doing, and that goes from stuff that we might do in the ring to backstage stuff. So whatever. And I just said, like, actually, I've always had this idea of copying your look as a Surfer Sting. And he was just like, dude, I have all that old gear. We can do it. And so we set the gears in motion right away. And the coolest, like, little cherry on top for everything was sitting backstage in a chair, in a makeup chair, while Sting himself was applying the makeup. Like, again, I'm a wrestling fan at heart. You know, we're the biggest fans because we decide to wear tights and baby oil, and you know, we decide to actually go for it and do it. So you know, having that little kid in me sitting there getting made up by Sting himself is like, you know, it's like it's kind of like that commercial. I just saw this commercial again. The little kid saying Brett, yelling down the hallway, and he puts the glasses on him. You know,
Yeah,
you know that.
that's phenomenal. And I'm sure that's something we'll get into eventually, very soon, probably. The run you had with Sting. I mean, that's just, again, so many people have said it. We've said it. TNA, like you're running TNA, was something that we can't wait to get into. We have a question from 4over, and they says, has Ken ever been given or given out a receipt in the ring? I'm sure that's.
I don't think I've ever been. Yeah, that is a topic for another day, another podcast. Um, but aside from one big one, um, which we'll talk about later, I don't think I've ever been given a receipt, really. I think receipts for the most part are bullshit. I tell my students, like, they're meant to be for when somebody is being very dangerous repeatedly and they're not listening. They're going into business for themselves. It's just kind of like a, hey, wake up, man, fucking stop it. Um, there have been a few instances, like I remember coming up in the indies for whatever reason, like every week I'd get punched in the face, just accidentally. You get dings and dangs, you know, scrapes and bumps and bruises. So I would always go back, and I was a personal trainer. I would always have to go back and explain, like, where'd you get the black eye this week? Where'd you get the busted lip? This, or this. And I remember, like, God, I'm just sick and tired of, like, can I just have one match where I don't get busted open? And I was in this match in Milwaukee against Austin Aries, and I'm on all fours, and he goes to kick me. He's just gonna, like, punt kick me in the chest. For whatever reason, he, like, missed my chest and just straight right in the face. And I remember sitting back in the buckle and just, like, almost no selling it, like, looking at the
Damn.
person in the audience. And, you know, they were like, oh, like, it's funny when the audience, like, they can see it, they go, oh, that was real. And I remember he did this big circle and he came back to me and I just fucking boom. I fucking, you know, and I didn't like kill him with it, but I gave it to him a little bit. And then I scurried over to him and I covered him and I was like, sorry, dude, you okay? And then, yep. I had that coming to me. Clothesline me. All right, boom, we're back to it. I had a similar instance with Jeff Hardy too one time on a TNA house show. But yeah, you motherfucker. Reverse me into the steps. Boom.
Damn.
And then, you know, there's that little moment of like, hey, sorry, dude. You okay? I'm okay. We're still bros, you know. Like,
And this is during the match when this happens.
yeah.
That's pretty cool. We have another question from Mani Vaughn. Ken, is it true that the plan was for you to cash in on Triple H at WrestleMania 24 with Vince by your side as the illegitimate son angle?
I have absolutely no idea. Like, I've never heard of that before. It's possible that
really?
somebody, you know, here's the thing about, you know, wrestling and plans. Plans are changed virtually every day. At least that's the way it was when I was there. It's just like things keep happening. Somebody gets injured, somebody gets in trouble, the thing's not working, ratings suck, whatever. They're just constantly changing. So maybe somewhere at some point a writer pitched that idea, but I never heard of it.
I know that the Money in the Bank, the run with that's something we definitely will dive into. So really push for more on that because there's a lot of questions I would like to ask you about that. But I do think that's again a future episode. That's so with the mailbag. There's some questions that I mean you can lightly give a kind of fair answer, but I think there's so much meat on the bone with a lot of this stuff. Naneto Nevarush. Oh man, I'm the worst at this. It says
I feel like at some point we're gonna have like a clip of you butchering people's names.
Do you know that? It's such a me thing to do. So Naneto Nevarush says, "You said WWE fired you was your fault, but I think you really don't believe that. But you don't want to say things against Cena or Orton, and it's almost like they're saying, "Am I right?"
Are you?
Yeah.
There is a lot more there, to be honest. And I don't think I've not said things because I'm worried, like I don't want to say bad things about those people. It's just like I don't want to whine about it. You know, it is what it is. It happened. However, there is a lot more to discuss, and I feel like at some point we probably should discuss and just get it all out on the table. I think it'll be cathartic for me, at least. So yeah, in fact, I'm gonna go ahead and say, like, I think we should do a full episode on that. And I think like once we reach, say, 100,000 subscribers, we'll do that episode. Fully, no holds barred. What do you think?
So you're saying if we reach 100,000 subscribers, enough to get you a little plaque behind you on the wall, not only will we talk about it, but there is more to be said than what's been said on any other podcast.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, there you have it, folks. A reason to hit that subscribe button. I mean, that feels like I'm trying to push a shameless plug there, but I think, do you know what? It's everybody knows what's up, and I think it would be great to do a final conversation about it, and then we can put that to bed and focus on everything that's coming for the future, because it's still prevalent in everybody's minds when they hear Mr. Anderson, Mr. Kennedy. So I think it's a great goalpost. And why would we do it? Well, of course, to celebrate the growth of the channel, you know, the next chapter of Mr. Kennedy / Anderson. Keep your eyes peeled. Adrian Pagan says, ever thought about doing an autobiography?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's something that it's just a matter of putting pen to paper, I guess, because I've got tons of stuff up here, and I've been approached before about doing that with a ghostwriter, and ghostwriting is not something I'm interested in. Like, I think like the best books that I've read as far as like wrestling books go, like Jericho, Mick Foley, you can tell it comes directly from them, from their brain. And I would like to, I'd like to do that. Definitely. That's coming.
That's something. Yeah, that'd be something we would look forward to. I don't think there's really a bad wrestling book out there. I think the most recent one I read was Brian Gewirtz, if that's how you say his name, which is excellent. A guy that doesn't wrestle, but he talks about his time in the wrestling industry, and it actually has you howling with just so many different great stories.
Really? Brian is hugely influential in the wrestling business. Was there for so much. Head writer of Raw when I got hired. It was Brian Gewirtz was the head writer of Raw, and Dave Lagana was the head writer of SmackDown.
Oh wow!
I'm sure he's got great stories.
Yes, it's always great to still kind of keep up with what people are doing when they leave the business. So many people have made so many good books. But there's another episode, us talking about some of the best books that professional wrestlers and agents have written. Marella. Why is everybody's names like that? Like, where's Dave?
Their parents. I say that sometimes, like when people come up to me at autograph signings and stuff, I'm like, your parents hated you. And you do a name that, like, literally everybody has to go, how do you say that? Or how do you write that?
Totally.
And it's funny because like nowadays parents like intentionally give normal sounding names, weird spellings. Like,
Yeah.
somebody comes up and, hey, what's your name? Bob. How do you spell it? Honestly, it sounds sounds ridiculous, but like I'll start writing B-O-B and they'll be like, no, it's B-A-H-B.
That's Bob. Bob. So Mariah goes on to say, what is the biggest regret in your professional career? That's quite a loaded question, right?
Oh, that's too hard to nail down. One of the biggest regrets was I've said this before, won Money in the Bank. They asked me to do this is literally the way that it was pitched to me, my Austin 316 moment at the end. I had a great speech. I knew that it would work, and I asked permission, and I was told no, and it involved swearing. And at the time, when I first got there, and they had just entered into this, like, you can't say damn, you can't say ass on TV, which, looking back on my time there, that's the piece that I feel was missing, like where like I wasn't able to fully engage and believe and buy into it. I was just reading words on a page, so to speak.
Yeah. I've been watching a lot of your old promos, and even though you're saying you were reading them from a page, it did not feel like that. And I think that's one of the big reasons as to why people connected with you.
I hate watching them. I do.
When you were at TNA though, did you? I'm guessing you had a little bit more freedom to go with the flow.
The TNA stuff was better, definitely, but the WWE stuff, like, it's so cringe for me when I watch it. Seriously.
We've all got projects like that.
But I'm able to look at it and say, like, as a learning experience, right?
Yeah.
And I'm able to then, when I'm directing my students, like, I've been there, I've done that. Like, this is why this would be better. So
yeah, totally. Kevin Meeks says, "What does finally a name?" And it's a name I'm really familiar with. What does Ken think of today's superstars? Seth Rollins, more specifically.
Ooh, it's just awesome. Like, Seth is something else, like, just really, really, really special. And they, people have asked me from time to time, who'd you like to do something with? Seth is up there on that list of people that I'd love to have a program with.
He seems to be, in a sense, not like Shawn Michaels, but you could plug Shawn Michaels in anywhere. If it was against the Undertaker, you still could believe that he could win. I think Seth, for us as fans, that's the way we tend to feel him.
He's special, and I just don't know any other way of. He's so unique.
Totally. MB8 Trains asks, who would Ken's all-time dream back and forth mic battle be with? That's a great question.
Piper.
Roddy
Piper. Like, he was awesome on the mic.
He was.
But I mean, my all-time favorite professional wrestler, the guy who, like, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now if it wasn't for this guy, is Steve Austin.
Yeah, totally.
Steve or The Rock. Get about it.
Yeah. Nah, totally. I think a lot of people as well compare a lot of your characteristics from your WWE time to Stone Cold's. It's a trailblazer.
I when I got to TNA too, that was sort of the direction they were pushing me, and it was kind of frustrating because, I did a little hunting. I wore camouflage, like a hat, to the building. And so, you're our Steve Austin, and I kind of feel like I was pushed that way, and I didn't want to be that. I didn't want to be the next Steve Austin. I wanted to be the first Ken Anderson,
I totally get that. There's a great question here, actually, from Al Knowwhere 6647 asks, what were your honest thoughts on the Immortal Championship belt?
I have no recollection of it, honestly.
Really? You know the
You have a
Jeff
picture
Hardy
of it?
looking title. Yeah, you remember
Oh,
the
I remember the Jeff Hardy one.
Yeah. So did they not name that the Immortal Championship? Because it was presented to him when he turned heel and joined Immortal, right?
Oh, it was the one that he drew, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, I hated that belt.
Yes.
I hated it for me. I loved it for Jeff.
Yeah.
But then they put it on me, and they had me carry it around, and I was like, I don't want that one. I want the one.
That's totally.
It makes more sense because it's like, you took it from him, so
Yeah.
but I want that one.
Does that not would it not make more sense to go, right, I've taken it from him and done a JBL and been like, this is going right in the trash and give me the the prestige. But it totally
Yeah.
does feel like I can't think about that title and not see Jeff Hardy in my mind. So anybody carrying that, subconsciously I'm saying he's got Jeff Hardy's belt.
I used to have to bury it on TV, like I love Jeff.
Yeah.
I love his artwork, but I had to
Yep.
bury the belt on TV. I remember I used to say, like, I could draw a better picture. I could stick a crayon between my butt cheeks and squat over a piece of paper and draw a better picture than that.
I mean, it's good that it works that way. So it's good that actually you gave an honest opinion, no dancing around it. Kevin McIntosh says, was Ken actually supposed to be Vince's son in a storyline, and his thoughts on the TNA and WWE partnership?
Yes, I was, and it was like presented to me. I remember Stephanie first said, "Hey, Vince needs to talk to you about something. I think you'll really like it." And then, I talked to Vince, and he pitched this whole, it's going to be a long storyline. I'm looking for my illegitimate son or child, as it were. We're going to have a series of, over the course of the next few months, we're going to do an investigation and we're going to find it. And he said, I don't know where it goes from there. We'll see. It could be, it could last a couple months. It could last a year. Who knows? We'll see. And it ended up going over a year, right, with Hornswoggle. So
I'll follow up on that question. Do you think Hornswoggle was a great replacement for the Mr. McMahon?
He was the only he was the answer, right? Like, if it wasn't going to be me, he had to be Hornswoggle.
It does make sense. So in some way,
he fucking killed it too.
Yeah, of course. In some way, almost kind of feels like your brothers in a sense.
We kind of are. Like, we're kind of connected.
There's a film there, by the way. Who would not love to see a film where Vince McMahon is the father of? It's like twins. That's twins. That's a twins sequel, except with like some crazy guy as their dad. Which brings me to we've got a couple more questions. I could see that actually being like a tagline. I'm going to actually get my guy Matthewman to illustrate that into a movie cover. Stephen Al Ensania says, what's your take on Mr. McMahon not being in charge of WWE anymore?
I think what Vince did for the business was insanely amazing. But he's like, I don't want to say out of touch. That's too, like, mean it in a negative sense. It's just like, at some point it's time to evolve and change. And I love the changes that have occurred since he's been gone. So, that's all I can look at. I love the WWE under Paul Levesque. Like, it's been fantastic.
It's been great to see. Vince, actually, since he's been gone, do you think that he'll ever return? Because there are rumors.
Never say never, right?
Yeah.
Crazier things have happened.
Yeah.
There was another question earlier with the Aces and Eights thing.
And the thoughts on TNA and WWE partnership? Would that be?
The partnership. I think that's fantastic. Yeah, that is amazing. One of the things that I knew when I was at TNA was I was lucky and I was fortunate to be able to make some decent money when I was at TNA. I was paid well.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't WWE money, but it was really, really, it was good money.
Mm-hmm.
And just any time that my friends in the business, my colleagues are able to go and do their thing and get paid for it, I think is a win. So seeing this partnership and sort of the way it doesn't feel like, and it doesn't feel like WWE is actually pulling the strings and they actually bought TNA, and it doesn't feel like that. It feels like they're two separate companies, and every once in a while they do a thing together. And totally really cool.
I think it's a great partnership, and I think it's great that WWE don't own TNA and that TNA exists as its own entity still. I think there's a lot. You said when we had the conversation before that having WCW was great for the business, and then a lot of it died when WCW went down. So I think in some way it is great to have TNA and of course AEW.
When I was at WWE before I got fired, we knew that WWE was the only game in town, essentially. Like, if you wanted to make real money, work in front of real big crowds, WWE was it. There was no other alternative, really. So now it seems like I don't know if that makes sense to you, but now there are so many options for people. You've got the Super Indies, you've got New Japan, you've got AAA, you've got CMLL, and it seems to be growing and expanding daily.
It's a great time to be in wrestling. One of the final questions, this is the second last question, great question, from Brick Motto Official. How many action figures of Ken Anderson or Mr. Kennedy do you own?
So I want to say there were like 33 different variations of, a lot of them were the same repeated. They were just in different packaging, but there were, I at one point owned all of them, but from a bunch of different moves and just stuff being in storage, I've got a few here and there. One of my favorites is there's a ring giant and it's out of the box. So I used to try to get one of everything. I would buy. So my rookie, I bought that and then I unboxed one of them. So I would have one out of the box and one in the box, but that's long gone.
I'm sure we'll be able to find them all again eventually. Got one last question here from Marshall Entertainment. Wishing you all the best, Ken. Would you be open to one more run as a full-time wrestler at either AEW or WWE?
Yeah.
Short and sweet. Of course, I don't think you got into the business to be like, nah, do you know what? I've done my time. So this episode is all about your time traveling with Eddie and Chris, which is something that's been talked about previously. However, there's a journey there, and we wanted to start back in 2005, where we had spoken previously about you being one of the first Paul Heyman guys, because you were in OVW, and you were there the day, actually. We can maybe talk about this very briefly. You sent me a voice note, and I think I laughed at it for like 4 days because you'd done a Jim Cornette impression. So you were there the day that Jim Cornette, they call it the paintbrushing incident, where the boogeyman comes out with horns, and Santino's daughter gets really frightened. He then starts laughing at his daughter being frightened, goes back to the locker room, and Jim Cornette fucks him up. That's
a different story than I was aware happened. I didn't know all that other stuff. No.
Oh, did you not? Is this the first time you?
So
really,
I Santino was in the amateur class. So it was guys that were in the amateur class just weren't under contract. And they would oftentimes use those guys as just like fillers, runners. He was on that particular day, I believe. So if somebody comes to the ring with a ring jacket or something like that, they take it off. He would go and grab it, bring it backstage, and then he would he'd park himself right outside the curtain, but in view of all the fans. And so on that day, he was doing his job. And the Boogeyman, the lights go out. And this is the first time they're debuting the Boogeyman character. Nobody's seen it. None of us have seen it. It wasn't like something that they walked through during the day, as far as I remember. So he sees, Boogie coming out from underneath the ring, doing his thing. And he's just like, yeah. And I was standing literally 5 feet away. And you don't want to sell a giant man coming out from underneath the ring? That looks like he does. You don't want to sell him? How about this? How about that? You want to sell this? How about that? How about this? And he's just like,
Sorry, Jim Cornette is like a spinner.
And then, and then he was like, no, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. No. And I remember somebody saying like, Santino is a judo champion or something like that. He's a badass in real life. Yeah. And Jim was in his 60s, I think, at the time. But he did the right thing. He just took it. I think that's the right thing to do, because no matter what, if he had done anything but that, we probably wouldn't be having this discussion right now. It would just be like he was the guy that got fired from OVW for bucking up to Jim Cornette.
I've heard him talk. I've heard Santino talk on Renee's podcast where he says, even now he wouldn't attack or hit Jim Cornette. It's not within him to attack an older man, but he would have liked to have squashed the beef with Cornette, because it's like, you look up to someone and you're getting into a business and you truly respect someone, but the door's shut. Like, you're never going to get past that purely based off something that I truly think was a bit of a misunderstanding, because the way Santino tells it is his daughter was there and she was 10. Okay. So he was actually laughing at his daughter getting frightened by the Boogeyman. And I think as fathers, we know what it's like. If you see your child experiencing something, you'll laugh. You'll react and respond that way. And I think, is it, in your opinion, actually, is it worth, from Jim Cornette's point of view, is it worth holding on to that hatred all these years over essentially soiling the Boogeyman's OVW debut?
No, absolutely not. It's just holding on to that hate they say it's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die, right? Like it's so much negative energy that you're expending on somebody else, and I can sit here and the Randy Orton John Cena thing, right? Like, I can sit here all day and think about it and hate them, and their day goes, they don't give a fuck. Their day goes on just,
yeah.
They don't think about me, so I'm the real loser in that situation.
So in that time period, and the reason we brushed over the Cornette thing is you were in OVW, and I know that previously, because I've heard on Jim Cornette's podcast, a fan had wrote in saying, Mr. Kennedy said that you never booked him, and Jim Cornette was like, I did not book him. I just, he was actually quite kind about you, but he just says it wasn't intentional. Now at this point, he leaves the company after the Santino, and this is where you and Paul Heyman align. At that point, Paul Heyman sees in you what everybody else got to see. What was that like? I mean, I imagine you watched DCW before you became a wrestler. What was it like having Paul Heyman come to you and be like, I see it in you?
First of all, if I might, people stir the pot with the Jim Cornette thing. Like, I've said this repeatedly, and I mean it. What Jim said, his response to that is what I've said all along. Like, it wasn't intentional. I am one of 50 or 60, men and women that are trying to make it to TV. And he just like, I wasn't giving him, you oftentimes when you're brand new, they give you like a 5-minute match and say, go out there and get yourself over. Well, you try to wrestle really good and, like, and it's just not anything unique or special. And, so that, yeah, it wasn't like he was intentionally putting his thumb on me or anything. I never felt like that. It was just like, for whatever reason, I just wasn't there yet. And actually, he actually did start kind of pushing me a little bit because 2 weeks earlier, 2 weeks before he got fired, he gave me an opportunity to go out and cut a promo. And I just like swung for the fences. I was like, and I was like veins popping, going crazy. And I wish I could, hopefully we can find it. It was with the Blonde Bombers. I was with Tank Toland and what was his name? Tank and then Melissa Coates was also with us. It was 4 of us. And I cut this promo and I came back to the curtain and he was like, where the fuck is that guy, man? And so he started giving me little opportunities every week doing that. Yeah. So going back to Paul Heyman comes on, right? Like it was I had some run-ins with Paul as I was an extra at TV often. One day I was in the ring with a bunch of guys. There were like 12 extras booked. It was tons and tons of extras for whatever reason. And we were all in the ring just doing some tag in, tag out. So like 6 guys would stand on one side, 6 guys on the other side, and you just sort of tag in, work a little bit, tag out. And for whatever reason, there was a talent meeting that day. Everybody was at the talent meeting except for Jim Ross and Paul Heyman were sitting ringside and they were just chatting. And I remember I got in there and I did my thing and I tagged out and Paul just said, come here for a second. And I walked over to him and he was like, who trained you? And I just said, I got trained by a couple guys in Green Bay who, knew what they were doing. And then I went and I got polished up by Brad Rangans in Minnesota. And he was like, Brad, I know Brad. I know Brad very well. Obviously Brock Lesnar was trained by Brad Rangans. Mm-hmm. And I think Brock and Brad to this day are like best friends. And yeah. And so then that sort of started. And then later on in the day, I remember Johnny Ace coming and saying, hey, Paul wants you to come and wants you to cut a promo. Right. So then I went and I met with Paul and I was like, what do you want me to do? And he was like, just whatever you want to do, a heel or baby face. Maybe it's something like this. And then he fucking cuts like on the fly babyface promo. Just awesome. And then I'm like, I'm thinking about that. I'm digesting it. And then he goes, or maybe you do this. And then he fucking cut the heel promo on the fly. Perfect. It's like, this guy's something else. And then for whatever reason, so I planned it out. I had something in my head. And then for whatever reason, didn't happen, which is a regular occurrence on TV days. And so then I would, from time to time, he gave me his number that night. I remember he was like, call me on a Wednesday. So I called him on Wednesday. And then I proceeded to call him every Wednesday for like the next fucking 2 years. But, it is what it is. People are hard to get a hold of sometimes, especially when you're running that schedule. Mm-hmm. So I just never got in touch with him, but I would see him from time to time. And then when I was at OVW, he would come down and do, because I believe he was a writer at the time. When I first got to OVW, he was a writer on SmackDown or Raw. And he would come down like every couple months and he would hold promo class. And he would have us go sit in a room. It would just be you, Paul, and a camera. And you'd cut a promo. And then you would critique it. And then you'd go home that night and you'd sort of modify and adjust the dials and then come back and cut the same promo. And then he would give you more critiques. And he always had like great notes for me on day 1. And then day 2, I would go in there, I would cut the promo, and he would go, "Okay, thank you. Loved it." And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
anything else? Like, is that it? Nope, loved it. Thank you. See ya. Like, oh, this guy actually hates me because you got to have something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's just trying to get rid of me. So then, fast forward, paintbrush incident happens. We started hearing through the grapevine, Paul Heyman's coming in. He's going to do the writing, and I was told to come to TV early because OVW television taped on Wednesdays. I was told to get there like 15 minutes early, so I did it. And Paul came up, shook my hand. He said, "I need to talk to you." Pulled me into a room, and he goes, "You're the next guy out of here." You can hear Paul in that, like, just, "You're the next guy out of here."
Mm-hmm.
Very bold, blunt. And I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, I've been a fan of yours since that day that I first saw you in the ring as an extra. I've been following your career as much as I can. I've loved the promos that you've done, the work that we've done when I come down for promo class. I'm going to do so much stuff with you over the course of the next few weeks that they're going to have to watch. And you will get called up. And I always try not to get excited about things in the business. I really like, well, thank you. I appreciate it. It's inside. I'm like exploding. Like, this is amazing. And all Heyman is telling me this stuff. But I'm also like, simmer down, might not happen. Just like the call me on Wednesday. It could be one of those scenarios, right? So that night, I believe OVW is like a 1-hour program, and I must have had 28 minutes of that program between some backstage promos, um, an in-ring promo, a match, and he just started, "Do this, try that, try this." And then, and then I think 3 weeks in, he said, "Go out there, cut the ring announcer off, cuss him out, tell him he's the shit, and you do your own big grand introduction." And so I did, and I said my last name twice and came back through the curtain, and everybody was like, "That's it. Keep doing that." And then two weeks later, so it was 5 weeks, I believe. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Dreamer. "Hey, they would like to see you at TV this week."
Damn. That must really be like, everybody that's ever went to a wrestling school always dreams of these type of scenarios where you're going to be, even just to know that you're walking up to the PC nowadays or something like that, like just that next stage, and you've got Paul Heyman literally saying to you, "You're the next guy out here." That must have really give you, a real dash of confidence.
It was crazy. It was a dream come true, like, all right. And then honestly, like, I had 6 years of experience, 5 years of experience on the indies. I felt like I was ready for it. I had enough seasoning. I was ready to take that next step. So when I had that first dark match as an employee of the company or as an independent contractor of the company, um, I felt like I belong here. So
Yeah.
that match went well, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Well
I
enough.
think it'd be obviously a lot more to than just the match. Here's a question that I would ask anybody, but who's the first person you called the minute you knew you were going up?
Probably Sean Daivari.
Nice.
Sean Daivari, because I was the first person that he called. We became really, really close. We're, I'd say he's my best friend in the wrestling business. We had traveled. See, early on, I had probably had a year under my belt when I first met him on an independent show. And then we quickly realized that we had sort of the same mentality. We were willing to go anywhere. We had big aspirations. We wanted to learn the WWE way. We were constantly trying to modify our work to satisfy whoever was looking at the time. It was Dr. Tom Pritchard at first. It was Kevin Kelly at first, then Dr. Tom, then Tommy. And yeah, so I remember the day he got hired, he called me and said, I just wanted to let you know you're the first person I'm calling. I just got signed. And so,
wow.
Yeah, it was cool to be able to reciprocate. And to be fair, Sean had a big part in getting me hired to begin with, which is a podcast for another day.
I think there's a lot there. I don't think people know that. Like, we know that Triple H and Shawn Michaels are best friends, but I don't think people know necessarily that, Daivari's, would you say, one of your closest friends in the business?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And like we don't talk to each other every day, but like still, it's like one of those friendships where we don't talk to each other for a couple months, and then we can bump into each other, and it's just,
Yeah, that's amazing. When you got called up, I believe your first run on house shows was at Scotty 2 Hotty. What was your first experience essentially walking through the door in what is now the big leagues?
Just, it was so cool, and it was so quick how it just went from, God, I would give anything to have this be my full-time job. Actually, it was my full-time job when I was at OVW, but just to be on the road, and then here I am, I'm doing it. I'm putting a match together with Scotty, and I'm winning, like, wins and losses aren't important, but at that time, I was a jobber, basically, or enhancement talent.
Mm-hmm.
To go from that to I'm a player was pretty cool. And Scotty, I remember those first couple months, Scotty and Funaki and even Bob Holly were just like amazing to work with. They were so cool.
Was there any of those guys like not what you expected to be in the ring?
No, not. What do you mean by that? Like,
just like so for whatever little experience I've had in the wrestling industry in the ring, there would be guys that I would essentially enhance, that I felt like only made me like look amazing, so that when I knew that I was matched with them, I was like, oh, this will be great. That's my only experience in that. So when you think about those, you think, for me, Scotty 2 Hotty is the entertainer. Funaki, I would imagine, would be a technician, and then Bob Holly, I'm like, right, if you come to the ring with him, you're probably going to have a nice pack the next day. That being the general idea, were they anything like that, or what was your expectations versus what they actually were like?
The first two were as to be expected. Like, I expected that they were going to be great to work with, and they were going to be easy to work with. Mm-hmm. And Bob Holly had sort of a reputation at the time of being like the test.
Yeah.
I came in, I saw my name next to Bob Holly. I was like, oh boy. Here we go. And he was a little stiff to me at first. I remember that first day I saw our names, Ken Anderson or Ken Kennedy versus Bob Holly. And I just walked up to him. I was like, I see that we're matched up. Well, what would you like to do? He goes, we're going to go out there and fucking work. That's what we're going to do. Okay. Yes, sir. We're not going to fucking call everything in the back here, okay? We're going to go out there and work. Okay. Yes, sir. I was just like shitting myself inside, but having to have this like hard exterior and like, I'm cool with that. And I was, to a degree, because I knew that like we weren't going to go out there and he wasn't going to put himself in a situation where we both look bad. So there's one thing that when a wrestler sort of goes into business for themselves, or goes out of their way, or doesn't go out of their way to make another wrestler or performer look good, especially somebody that's got less experience, like everybody in the back knows what's happening. Like, you can see and go like, oh, he's not working with him. And that's not cool. Nobody wants to be that guy. So Bob was just Bob was really cool to work with. Actually, after that day, I remember I was just like, well, I gotta let him know that I can take it. And his chops were, and they were in there, you know. And I remember sometimes wrestling hurts. Shawn Michaels, I don't know, sometimes wrestling hurts. And I remember I called. He chopped me, and then he said, "Duck this and give me a couple." And so I did that. I hit him, and I was like, "Duck this, give me 10." And, and he gave me 10 chops, and I just sold it all around 10. He counted them out 10. And it was like one of those, when we came through the curtain after that match, he was like, "Okay, all right, you're okay." And then he sort of softened up a little bit. And then pretty soon, like we became really, really close, really good friends over the years.
Yeah, we'll definitely need to cover.
Contrary to popular belief.
Yeah, there's a lot out there that we can cover in a future episode. It's definitely, I'm fascinated with Bob Holly. I like reading his book. He always felt that he should have got more from the business, and as someone who grew up watching him, I would have believed if he had won, if he had ascended higher in his career than what he was used. I don't think people like myself would have had any like I buy him as a champion, you know. I buy him as a guy that could have done a lot more because he was badass.
100%. I agree. I was a fan of Bob Holly. I remember watching and going, "That's what I want to look like. Like that's the ideal wrestler body shape for me." He was believable. He was badass. He was smooth. In fact, I was just watching. I watched last night with Anastasia. It was a tag match that I had. JBL and I tagged against Bob Holly and Rey Mysterio, and just like how smooth he is throughout.
Yeah, it's definitely. I don't think people talk about him enough in regard, because people, when you hear people say like you build the perfect wrestler, they talk about Randy Orton all the time. They say that like if he was born to do anything, it was wrestle. And I think there are guys like Bob Holly out there that do.
He didn't get his flowers. He never got his flowers.
Yeah.
He really should.
I think there's another episode in the future, like wrestlers who should have got their flowers that absolutely didn't. So you're called up, you now are on the road, and I think that's one of the things growing up we were not always aware of. We just assume, oh, you're working when we see you on TV, but the life of a wrestler is non-stop, and you have to literally give up your life to become that. Travel partners are, of course, when I was in any type of wrestling training, they say that 50% of your learning is physical, and the other 50% is here. And I think the classroom was a car.
Might even be more than 50. It might even be more than 50-50, to be honest with you.
I would agree with that. I read online that your first travel partners were Matt Hardy. Was that your very first, or did you have someone before then?
No, my first travel partners were Sean Daivari and Nova, Simon Dean, and I can't remember. It was just sort of like week to week. It would fluctuate because sometimes guys wouldn't be used on house shows, and some weeks, and then so it was just kind of. But it was Daivari and Nova and I, and that lasted for a couple weeks. And they were really like giving me a good push on TV. It was something I was hearing a lot of positives, like Tommy would pull me aside because I was still doing OVW. I would do the house shows, and then I would do TV, pay-per-view or whatever. And then I would go Wednesday, I would go to OVW and still do OVW TV. Remember Tommy would be there and he'd be like, "You're the flavor of the week. They love you. Vince loves you right now. You're the next Steve Austin. That's what they keep saying." Like stuff. I would hear stuff like that, which is obviously good to hear, but I'm trying to like not get too big of a head, believe my own shit. I'm sorry. What was the question leading up to that?
I was just saying. So we kind of only read online that was Matt Hardy was your first travel partner. So you started off with Daivari, and how did that transcend into then? Who was it after that?
So then I'm in the locker room one day, and Batista just said, "Hey man, who you riding with?" And I just said, "What I just told you." And he goes, "Hey, nothing against those guys. They're awesome. I love those guys, but you really need to get on the riding schedule or whatever. Get in the car with some vets. Look around. There's a bunch of vets. You can learn a lot." And immediately I was like, "You're right." And so fuck it. I walked up to Chris Benoit, and I just said like, "Hey, wondering if I could possibly jump in and ride with you guys, pick your brains." And Chris just like he was chewing on a straw because he always chewed on these straws. Let me talk to Eddie about it. I'll get back to you. So okay, cool. He came back to me like within an hour and said, "I talked to Eddie. He's cool with it on one condition: you're doing all the driving." Duh. Like, in my head, I'm saying that not out loud, but of course. And so then next week, I landed wherever we were and got the rental car. And we started, and I started. It was like probably 3 or 4 weeks. It wasn't a really long time, but it was at least a month, maybe a little bit longer, that I rode up and down the roads with Eddie and Chris.
Do you think there was any chance that Eddie and Chris were standing there in catering one day, just looking over at you, and Batista walked by, and they're like, "Batista, we can't be arsed driving anymore, so go over to Ken and be like, yo, you should send him your way," and it was just all a big ruse to get you to drive.
No, absolutely not. In fact, that's funny. They would have just come up and said, like, "Hey, you want to ride with us?" Like, they would have just said it, on the drive.
Before
you're driving. Okay, yes, sir.
Before you started riding with them, did you have much interaction with them at all? Or was it just passing by, same locker room?
Eddie and Chris were two guys that were just always helpful. I would come back from a match. Come here for a second. And they'd pull me aside and they'd give me advice. "See, when you did this, you should have done this." And it was just like they dissect the matches. You were always looking out because their mentality was that like they wanted everybody to be good. If we're all good under this umbrella, like the whole show benefits from that. Mm-hmm. There's some people in the business who become like gatekeepers, and they're like, "No, we're the good wrestlers," and they were definitely not that way. I felt like they were standing on top of the mountain, sending rope ladders down over the sides and they grab my hand. It's the air is fine up here. We can all breathe. So I did have interaction, and it was always positive.
I was chatting today about the whole gatekeeper theory to my brother-in-law. A big, huge fan of yours. Huge fan of a lot of wrestlers that essentially went up against some known gatekeepers. My question to you about that: there's obvious gatekeepers. Now, I'm not going to say names of that to try and get clickbait, right? But there are gatekeepers where the fans, we watch a match, we watch a run between two people, and we go, "Come on, that doesn't make any sense," and we feel like someone may have kept their foot down on someone. Would it be safe to say that the majority of the time the audience are correct based on your experience?
No.
So you think it can be looked at that way?
I think oftentimes audience reads way more into
right.
It's just wrestling. That's for the most part.
Yeah.
I think those instances are few and far between.
Well, that's good to know, because I think a lot of people, like, if they see an instance of that between two wrestlers, where they see something, they go, "Oh, wait a minute, what was the need in that? It didn't make any sense." So that there's like that sticks with that wrestler. But then I always go, well, wait a minute, maybe that was the case at the time, but then you look at 10 other things where they did go out their way to make someone look amazing. So I tend not to stick with the stigma of that. So I wondered, based on your opinion, backstage and being around it all, like, because I know for a fact, I don't class myself as the IWC. I don't sit in that, this is how it is, and it's like this because of that. I am open to, like, everybody can be wrong about everything, but also everybody can do something. Like, everybody we know in life's done something shitty, right? It's human nature. That's the only way you evolve, is if you go, right, that's quite shitty. But no, I'm not. But it was interesting to ask you that, because I thought, there's you could type in right now, wrestlers that were held back, and you'll see a trend of names of the people that essentially gatekeep. Again, that's another few. We'll say that so many times. Another future episode, stars that could have been bigger than they were, and like you say, it's just down to sometimes timing and the fact that it just isn't what it appears to be. Because two different worlds, which is crazy. So you went from Matt Hardy to then traveling with Eddie and Chris. What were some of your actual times with Matt Hardy? Did you have some good car stories? What were
With
some
Matt?
of the things that?
No,
Yeah,
with
who did he teach?
no, I wasn't. Matt came later.
Did he? Right. Sorry, I got that wrong.
It ended up after, I believe, after Eddie passed away. I obviously, Chris was like, I can't do this, I have to, and he started riding with Chavo and Ray, and they were kind of like, they were kind of mourning together, and I understood that. I totally understood it, and it was then that I started riding with Matt. And Matt was somebody that was always really cool to me as an extra. He would always take time out of his day to talk and give me honest criticisms and feedback and just talk as a human being. And so, yeah, I started riding with Matt. And I think within 2 or 3 weeks of that happening, Shane Helms got drafted back over to SmackDown. And so it ended up being the three of us. And we, that was a blast. I loved traveling with those guys. It was so much fun.
Yeah, they definitely.
What's that?
No, I was just going to say, like, they definitely, from our perspective, they definitely look like it'd be a blast. I mean, how could you not have fun and learn so much from both guys?
I have this funny picture. Anytime anybody brings up me riding with those guys, excuse me. I have this picture. I don't remember where we were. Somewhere in the South in the summer, just ridiculously hot. We had rented a car and the air conditioning went out on the car. And I remember we're just dying, roasting in the car. And Matt and I were talking. We got lost in conversation, or maybe we were listening to radio for a while. And I look back, and fucking Shane Helms is just in his boxer shorts, sweating profusely, like just in the middle. Like, oh my God, I'm dying. Like,
Stand back, there's a heat wave coming through.
He did it just to pop us. And I don't know how long he was sitting there like that. That's the funny thing. He could have been sitting like that for 15 minutes, just like one of those instances where it's worth it to just ride it out instead of like, hey guys, Deb, look at me. It was like so much funnier to have us just turn around and go, what the
fuck? Proper out of costume. When Batista asked you, you should go ahead and ride with some veterans, who would the alternative be if Eddie and Chris were like, hell no?
I think probably Batista himself. The heavy hitter taker, which I would have done. I would have done that. I think I would have been comfortable asking. I remember doing a promo when Paul was running those promo classes down at OVW. I cut a promo on somebody who was like, not it was like mid card talent, because they would say like just pick an opponent, cut a promo on that person, and I cut a promo on this mid card talent or even maybe lower than mid card, and Paul was like, is that who you want to work? Is that who you see yourself working against? And I was like, well, yeah, but he was like, but couldn't you see yourself working against the Undertaker? Shouldn't you put yourself in that category instead of pigeonholing yourself? So I was like, yeah, it makes sense. And I remember I changed that night. I went home and I changed from whoever that was to the Undertaker. And so, yeah, I mean, look, at the time it was, here's my options, Rey Mysterio, Booker T, Bob Holly, um, Batista, Kane, Taker. We had some heavy hitters on that show.
Just imagine. I mean, what a choice, right?
Mhm.
As the fan within you, I mean, you could have. You can only imagine the kind of wealth of knowledge. I mean, just every time we talk about someone, you're telling us, things they've told you. Like for example, Paul there telling wouldn't you want to see yourself in that? It's amazing that like some of the greatest wrestlers, it's never really truly about what's happening physically in the ring. It truly is. It's all psychological. It's all about story, and it's about those nuggets, the spaces between. I know you and I have had conversations where we were talking about today's product and how different it is now based on back then. Like less is more.
It's not the moves; it's the stuff we do in between the moves.
100%.
Yeah,
That's essentially Stone Cold Steve Austin. When you think about some of his like greatest moments, it's one stunner in someone. So I suppose that actually includes a move, but on top of that, it's what he said, and your career as well. Like, of course, uh, it's funny. Like when I had said to my close circle, I says, I can't wait. I'm doing a new podcast, and you're never going to believe who. And they'll say who, and I just sent a GIF of a microphone, and they all got it. They knew it straight away, and I think that's when you know that you really break out of that group of guys. When you walk into a locker room, you're like, right, who are these guys? When you've got something special, and you managed to do that. How at what point were you like? Because you said that you said your name twice. At what point were you like? Could you feel it? You're like, I have it. This is it. Like, did you feel it even then? Did you know that was it, or did you think this could work? Like, were you very confident about it?
I was right away.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that I had something when I came back to the curtain, and virtually everybody in the locker room was, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Keep doing that, man. When you said your last name, like I wish I would have thought of that, and truly nothing really changed. I just started saying my last name twice, and I went from being somebody that nobody knew to being on TV every week, traveling up and down, traveling the world. Yeah, but I did, like I said, when I debuted, when I worked Funaki in that, it was originally scheduled to be Velocity, or I'm sorry, it was going to be a dark match, and they were going to let me do my gimmick, which they don't let extras do their gimmicks ever. They were going to let me do it. They wanted to actually see it live and in person. But Funaki was going to hit me with a super kick, 1, 2, 3. He was going to beat me. And I'm standing in gorilla position, and Dave Lagana walks up, and he's like, "There's been a change." And immediately I went to, they probably cut the match. Dark matches often get cut.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, "We have to come up with a finisher for you because you're going over." Which, for those that don't know, wrestle speak is you're going to win the match. And this is now going to be a televised match. It's going to be on Velocity, and welcome aboard. And he stuck his hand out like, I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, this is your debut. We're going to debut you right now.
Wow.
Yeah. And I remember being like, fuck yeah, let's go. Not, oh my God, I'm shitting myself. I just felt like I'm shitting myself, but in a positive, like, I got this sort of way.
That's good. That's watching your character, especially in WWE and even more so in TNA. Like, confidence was always there. It's like you couldn't see through anything because there was nothing really to see through. I think they say the best characters in wrestling are just you take yourself and you dial it all the way up, and that's definitely our experience.
And I think that I think fans can sense that sort of stuff, right? Like you can tell when somebody's not being authentic.
Yeah,
So,
totally.
like, something's off. You might not be able to put your finger on exactly what it is, but something about that is not right.
It's funny you should say that because I don't know what it is, but watching AEW, sometimes I've seen stars go from WWE where you're like, you get it, then they go over to AEW and something changes. And people that are watching this episode might even be able to tell us in the comments what they think that is. Something has changed to the point where I hear my friends say, Vince was right. When Vince doesn't see something in someone and they're like, well, I can go make it myself. They head over to AEW and then we go, Vince was right. Sometimes without Vince pulling the strings, it exposes them. So it works both ways. You can get people that are kind of held, not held, but they can't truly achieve their full potential. Or it works the other way where it's like, well, being around the WWE was actually the best thing for you. And what he's saying there, sometimes we can smell it. Sometimes you just don't know what it is. And I personally think Mercedes Moné, I think as Sasha Banks, I never questioned anything. But now when I watch her, it's like something seems off. Now I know she's talented in so many ways, but something doesn't seem right about the character that she is now. Do you?
I can't tell you in that particular instance because I don't watch enough of the product. I haven't seen much of that, so I couldn't give you an honest answer on that.
If you take
I know what you're saying. I understand what you're saying, and yes, I have seen that in the past. And I don't know what that is. I sometimes people. I think sometimes people have a hard time looking at themselves in the mirror honestly, saying like, "What can I change? What's good and what's bad?" They just sometimes like people just see the good. They're like, "I'm this, I'm that," instead of like, I believe as artists, because that's what we are. We should constantly be striving to like, what did I do wrong? And not in a negative sense. It's just like, what can I do better next time?
Totally.
Sometimes people just like get to a certain point and they're like, I fucking got this. Good.
Yeah,
That's
totally.
it.
And so I think some get there quicker than others as well. I think it's just part of your genetic makeup. While traveling with Chris and Eddie, what are some of like the biggest lessons you learned? Maybe even not just as a wrestler, but as a human being as well.
We, it's funny. Like one of the very first interaction that I had with Eddie that I can recall was as an extra. I walked up to Eddie backstage. I'm nervous, and I said, "Eddie, it's good to see you." And Eddie, without hesitating, he looked at me. He said, "It's good to be seen." And I still hit that from time to time. Like it's good to be seen, and it was so. It was working on a couple different levels there, right? It's like kind of deep when you think about it. It is good to be seen. I'm alive. It's another day above grass.
Totally.
But it was funny because like on those drives, it would be me in the driver's seat, Chris in the co-pilot seat, Eddie laid out in the back. And we would always have we would have an SUV, so he'd have plenty of room to lay out. And Eddie would be fairly quiet, and it would just be Chris and I chatting away. And every once in a while, you know, it would be like Chris and I would be talking, and all of a sudden you hear like, "Oh, sorry guys," and he'd roll the window down, just he'd crack all the windows. He just shit his pants. Yeah. Oh, sorry guys. We're going 70 miles an hour down the highway, so you can't talk for a couple minutes and then roll it back up. Okay, we're good now for a little while, guys. Then he'd fucking go back to sleep, and Eddie and I, or Chris and I, would start talking, and goes, sorry guys, and again, kind of funny. I remember an experience that we had. We were at a Bob Evans on a Sunday. We had just gotten done at the gym, and of course, it's packed in there. Everybody's getting out of church. Everybody wants to go to brunch. And we walk in, go up to the front, and the guy says it's going to be an hour. Okay, put our name on the list. As we're walking away, another guy said, like, hey, come here. Guys, come here. And so we walk over, and he's like, I got you guys. Come on, I got a table for you. And then Eddie just like stopped for a second. He goes, what do you mean? He goes, I got you guys. I got a table. And Eddie just said, like, hey man, don't treat us any different because you see us on TV and you think that we're special. All these people, they're here. They just got done with church. They want to eat too. We'll wait just like them. Then we sat there and fucking waited an hour. It's just a testament to like, he was actually a good human being. He was a good-hearted human being.
Mm-hmm. No, that's amazing.
It's kind of a good life lesson, I think.
Most definitely. I've heard on other podcasts that there's a rule when you travel that the driver doesn't get to sleep, so neither does anybody else in the car. Does that only apply to people that are not veterans?
No. That's sort of, it's not nobody. It's just the co-pilot can't sleep. That's sort of the unwritten written rule of travel is that the person, unless the driver says, I'm good, I got it, I want to just listen to music, take a nap, whatever, then you're fine. But otherwise, yeah, it's like you gotta keep your co-pilot awake. It's a sort of a safety precaution if nothing else. And
I can imagine.
Got a fucking 3-hour drive sometimes in between cities, so
yeah,
we can,
especially after you've just been beating your body up, and then people forget as well. Like, see, if I go to a concert or I go to a wrestling show, as an audience member, when I go home, I'm like, oh, that took it out of me. Do you know what I mean? So I imagine what it'd be like. I can only imagine what it'd be like for guys like yourself, that you soak up that noise, that atmosphere, and then you get in a car where it's quiet. Like it really, I understand truly having the co-pilot. Where would you guys typically eat? Was there like places that you would frequent, or did you just go for anywhere that sold food?
It would have to be something that was open because we would be like the last people out of the building. It's kind of funny when so Eddie and Chris would be on the show, they would get done and they would go and sit. There would be a monitor where you could watch the show as it was happening. And this was whether it was a house show or TV. House shows, it would just be one camera set up facing the ring, and you could just sit there. There was rows of chairs, and we just sit there and watch. A lot of times it was, and it was expected that you sit and watch every match. If you're on first, your ass is sitting there until the last match. You're not going and playing your DS in the locker room or your PlayStation or whatever. So those guys would sit and watch the monitor, and then they would go and sit in the locker room and chat and bullshit and talk about wrestling. And I remember Eddie had a Bible with him all the time. He was very religious, so he would always have a Bible, and like he'd be talking to Chris about certain passages, and oftentimes we would literally, like, we would be sitting there. They would still be in their gear, hadn't showered yet, And the janitor would be like, "Hey, you guys are the last ones here. Can you guys get out of here?" And Chris would always go around and pick up the locker room. So if their guys just take their wrist tape off and throw it, water bottles, people with spittoons, they'd like chewing tobacco, they'd spit. He'd pick those all up and find a garbage can for him. And his mentality behind it was like, we want to come back to these buildings.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want the building owners going like, God, those guys are a bunch of animals. We never want to rent to those guys again. So, and then by the time they got showered, changed, out the door, it's 11 o'clock, after 11. And so it was usually only like a Waffle House. Applebee's is open till midnight. TGI Fridays would be open till midnight. We had to go in there and get something quick. And then, depending on where we were and what the decision was, we would either eat, jump in the car, and do the drive that night. So it would be like a 2.5 to 3.5 hour drive. I think 3.5 was about as far as WWE would push it before they would book you a flight. And so we would either do that, or we would get, we'd eat, go to the hotel, get up the next morning and do the drive. So yeah, it was one of those three places pretty much. Maybe a Denny's in there. And then it was funny because like at the time I'm not making WWE money yet. I hadn't been on the road enough where I was really comfortable. And I went from healing a room with Sean Daivari and Nova. We get a Red Roof Inn for $80 a night, and three of us would pile into the room and would split it three ways. To these guys don't like to share rooms, and they stay at Marriott. They wouldn't stay at they wouldn't stay at the Hilton downtown or whatever. But it would be a Marriott, a Fairfield. At the time, it was, I want to say, like $125 to $150 a night. And I am inside just scrambling, like, how am I going to possibly do this? I remember shuffling money around and things like that every single loop to try, because I've got to pay for 5 nights of hotels on the road at $125 to $150 a night. And then we would get in. So say we did the drive, right? We went to Applebee's, ate, got on the road. Now it's 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. We're at the next town. And those guys we'd get our rooms, and then we would stand at the elevator. Okay, what time should we meet for breakfast and the gym? Oh, whatever you want, Eddie. Whatever you want. I'm cool with. No, really, Chris. No. And then they would go back and forth and ping pong.
Okay, nice.
And I'm sitting there going, I just want to go to bed. I just want to go to bed. But at the same time, I'm not complaining because this is awesome, but I'm really tired, and I'm thinking ahead. I got to do this again tomorrow. So, finally they would be like, okay, maybe we'll sleep in a little bit. Okay. And I'm thinking, oh, great, we're going to sleep in. So maybe 8:30, sound good? Yeah, 8:30. And we'll meet for breakfast. Then we'll go to the gym. And then we've got until, if it was a house show, we'd have until 7 o'clock. So then sometimes we'd be able to go back to the hotel and nap in the afternoon. And then I had to go back. I had to call home, had to check in. Then I had to unwind. I had to take my gear out of my bag, and I couldn't just drop my stuff, plop into bed, and fall away. I had to go through a process. So I'd get 3.5 hours. I always make sure I was right there first thing in the morning. Like I was 5 minutes early. Chris would be right on time. Eddie would be like 5 minutes late. Sorry guys.
I heard that Chris didn't sleep. I can't remember who it was that actually told a story about him going to sleep for like an hour or so and then got up straight into the gym. Was Chris as intense as the stories make him out to be?
Yeah, he had two. He was either sleeping, which isn't often, or he was full steam ahead, like 100 miles an hour, which we can get into that further down the line. That's definitely something to discuss, how that played into events that unfolded. But yeah, and then I'd work out with him. One of the things too is like he loved doing squats, air squats. It was something he picked up in Japan, and
Mhm.
he would do like I remember he uh he got mad at Daivari one time, and so when we would go to a building in the UK, like if we were on an international tour, there would be a chiropractor and a massage therapist that would be free of charge. You could just go lay down on their table.
Nice.
There's a pecking order also.
Of course.
So if I'm laying on that table, I definitely wouldn't be the first person in line. Let's put it to you that way. So one day, I guess Daivari was laying on the table and Shawn Michaels walked in. I wasn't there for this, but Shawn Michaels walked in, knocked on the door, said, "Hey, Shawn, how long are you going to be?" And Shawn said, "I don't know, like maybe 20, 25 minutes." And Shawn went, "Hmm." When he left and he went right to Chris Benoit and he goes, "Chris, come here. Am I crazy here? Let me run something by you." You know, and told him what just happened. Chris fucking right straight to the right straight to that door, kicked the door open. "Daivari, get up, go to the locker room, get your tennis shoes, meet me at ringside."
Oh, no.
Met him at ringside, squat, and then just started doing air squats, you know, and Daivari wasn't used to it. And when you're not used to it,
Mhm.
I start my students off with like 100 air squats. We do them continuously, right in a row, right?
Mhm.
And people are dying at the end of it. Um, I one time did 100. I think our second class we ever ran, I did 150 on the first night, and somebody ended up going to the hospital.
Jeez.
Well, the same thing that Daivari. So he said, "All right, squat," and Daivari starts doing squats. You know, he gets to like 178, and his fucking legs are wobbling, shaking. "No, no, no, you're not done. You're not done. Keep going, keep going." You know, goes bangs out like 10 more. He's falling on the floor. "Get up, get up," and he just kept riding him. And Daivari ended up, he was just hobbling around for like a week. And he said that when he pissed, it looked like root beer.
Oh, no.
There's a thing called rhabdomyolysis, I think is the technical name for it, the medical term for it. It's where your muscle tissue breaks down because every time you're working out, you're causing little micro tears in your muscle.
Mhm.
Then those tears repair themselves. Your body repairs those tears and makes them bigger and stronger.
Mhm.
Well, there was so much damage done that it like filters through your kidneys. So it was actually like he was pissing blood.
Oh, shit.
Oof.
Yeah.
Oh, that's talk
And
about intense.
yeah. Yeah. But that was Chris. He was, if you pissed him off or did something, he was a gatekeeper in the sense that like he believed in that pecking order. He believed in old school mentality that you respected the people that came before you in the business. And if anybody displayed any behavior that didn't align with that perfectly, like you were going to have a problem with Chris.
The enforcer. That's what it seems to be. The
And
enforcer.
and to be fair with Eddie too, but Eddie was just quieter about it.
Was Daivari told, like, here, this is why you're doing this, or
Oh, he
he
knew.
just had to figure it out? He knew. All right,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, he knew.
Hey, that would be a great marketing strategy for that masseuse. You know, so good that you'll be pissing blood thanks to Chris
Yeah,
Benoit.
yeah, right.
You know what I mean? I mean, you must have so many different stories. You know, how long was it? Was it 2 months or just over 5 months you were traveling with those guys?
No, it was only like 2 months, I'd say.
Two.
Yeah,
Yeah.
about 2 months, and just like in that time period, had tons of fun, tons of laughs, heard some crazy stories that I can't share ever.
I can imagine.
Um, but some good stuff, and um, yeah, and I'm trying to think of if there's any other stories. I had was kind of watching, like I was watching. Oh, so I have to bring this up, right? Like Eddie was pretty intense at times too. We I was wrestling. I was tagging with JBL against Rey Mysterio and Bob Holly in Laredo, Texas, which is right on the border. And literally, the lead up to the opening to the show was they showed the border. They showed that's Mexico. This is the United States. This is Texas, right? And started the show to start the show off. The crowd is 90% Hispanic, and JBL they fucking ding 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 ding. You know his all that sounds. He comes out and he has a sombrero. He's wearing a sombrero. He's got jumper cables around his neck, a bottle of tequila in one hand. He's carrying a Mexican flag. He's wearing a poncho. He's got an inner tube around his waist, and he's pulling a donkey. And there's like another guy named Juan that was fucking kind of holding on to the donkey as well, right? And so we got to the ring. We did this thing, and I remember going into it. JBL just said, "We're probably going to get some heat out there tonight. Uh, if someone hops the rail, if someone jumps in the ring, make an example out of the first one. Just make an example out of the first one. Just punch him square in the nose. Boom. And then we'll go back to back and we'll fight our way to the back." That was the buildup. You know, I'm thinking, this is going to be great. So we go out and, you know, he proceeds to, he got more heat. If you watch that, the heat, the nuclear heat that he got from that building. And he would get that regularly. We would go to like Italy. He would sing America the Beautiful as terribly as he possibly could, right? And I remember one time you could just hear this like rumbling and people there's and it just got louder and louder, and the rumbling got louder and louder, and the whole building was literally shaking, and it was them singing their national anthem and stomping their feet as loud as they could just to drown out what JBL was doing. It was really cool to be a part of that, you know. But I remember, so JBL gets in the ring and he drops the Mexican flag on the ground in the middle of the ring. And then he fucking somehow, with the inner tube around his waist, squeezes his way in, and he's standing there, gets the microphone, and he starts cutting a promo. And he's saying, you know, like stuff that just would not fly today. You know, and he steps on the flag. He stepped on it, like intentionally. And I think he cut the whole promo standing on the flag. And I remember, so we had the match. Everything's fine. We didn't have to make an example out of anybody. Made it to the back just fine. Come back, and Eddie is like, he's standing there and he's shaking, and he's like, JBL, I need to talk to you. Come here. And he like pulled him over, and he was like, "You don't understand, Holmes. In America, you do something like that, they will boo you. In Mexico, they'll fucking kill you." You know, he was dead serious. It was funny. But I want to say, like, JBL was just getting heat. You know, he wasn't. I don't believe that he feels that way.
Oh no,
you know, he was just playing a character, and that there are people that feel that way, that are that openly racist, and he was portraying that to get heat,
of course,
to tell the story.
It's kind
Sorry,
of
I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, not at all. I was just saying, like, do you think in any way that Eddie was like, you know, this is my place, and that he kind of bought into it a little bit, and it maybe soured how Eddie felt about the angle? No.
Well, he felt responsible, I think, for just smartening, and it wasn't done out of you know, it was done out of love. It was like, damn it, you can't do this. This is too. You pushed it too far. And to be fair, like JBL was like, "I'm sorry, I didn't."
You know, JBL for us again as the fans, I feel like we got the absolute best of JBL towards the end of his career. I think, see, like
He was.
I feel like if we had that JBL earlier in JBL's career, like I truly feel like we were not satisfied. We only just got JBL, like the best version of him, and then he kind of hung it up, which is unfortunate. There's
Well,
probably
luckily, we were able to still, be exposed to his talent through the calling of, play-by-play, color commentary and stuff. And now I've been seeing he's killing it. He's crushing it with these promos that he's doing now. Like, he's getting. I think GCW's used him. Some of the other like super indies have used him. It's good to see. He's still doing it. But I 100% agree with you. He was cool. I loved watching his matches because he knew how to manipulate the crowd. And it wasn't like, he got cheap heat, but the man, it was entertaining. Nobody else was doing it. Nobody else was doing it at the time. So
no, totally. And like, what was it? I can't remember who it was, but someone came out and essentially called Alberto Del Rio JBL. I think it was Cena. He was like, "Hey, aren't you just JBL?" When Alberto Del Rio came out, all suavish, and that's when you know that you've become almost like, no one compared him to the $1 Million Man, because that would be the obvious go-to. It was JBL, because JBL truly did create a new character that you probably now still see elements of in other superstars, but Alberto Del Rio being one of them, with the limo and his own wee announcer. It truly was. It was special. Do you think now, like, obviously we know how it ended for both? Do you think, had that not happened, like, you would be proper tight with Eddie and Chris even today?
yeah, I think so. I believe that I can't say that I was close with them, but we did have a very good, like, a bond in the short time that we were able to ride together, and I was able to like sit under that learning tree. I think so.
Yeah. If someone had said to you, like, a genie popped out and says, at the time, this is how life will end for both of these guys, do you think that you would ever have fathomed it?
No, definitely not. The Eddie thing to happen like the day of a show was just wild. And again, it's one of those scenarios where like the show has to go on, which it did. We just
Would I be right?
What's that?
Would I be right in saying that, and on that show, the day that he passed, that he was getting the world title that day? Because I've read several sources online say that he was meant to get the title that day.
I have no idea, no clue. I didn't know that. If I did know that, I've forgotten it. It makes sense. I mean, he definitely was one of those players, right? Like he was always in contention. Who was the champion at the time that he passed?
It was Batista.
Batista. I don't remember. What was the plan? I hit him with the chair, but it was building it. It was leading into something else. Wasn't it?
So it was a triple threat match.
Wasn't
That
it?
was happened. Batista. I'm sure it was Rey Mysterio.
Batista was trying to turn him heel, right? Or was it Eddie that was
the beginnings of it. Eddie had just turned face after the whole angle with Ray and Dominic. That had just finished, and he I just rewatched it recently. He didn't actually do anything to turn face. It was just Eddie being Eddie. Just slowly just became someone the fans were cheering for a month after he was doing all the heinous things that he was doing as part of the storyline for the custody of Dominic.
He was so good at and a lot of that stuff some of it was by design and some of it was just Eddie living in the moment. He was so good at reading the crowd and just working on the fly and like just having an idea. I'm going to do this. Yeah, I watch him on house shows because when I first started, he was working like quite a few. Like it was either the main event or the semi-main event that he was working. And I remember he always did this. He always had these crazy spots that were super entertaining, right? Like I remember at some point he would lose his mind and he'd jump out of the ring and he'd flip the apron up, make a big spectacle out of it, and he'd start pulling chairs out and he'd throw some chairs into the ring, and then he would grab a big toolbox and he would dump that, and the toolbox would open up and wrenches and hammers and screwdrivers and stuff would go scattering all about the ring, and then the ref would come in and admonish him for it, like, come on, you can't do that, and then he'd start like tidying up the ring, while Eddie was conspicuously for the crowd, shoving a wrench into his boot that would then come into play later on in the match. It was just like stuff like that.
That is really innovative.
And it was like, he literally would look at the crowd and go.
Totally. To the point where even in Eddie's last match, there comes a point in the match where he just goes like that to the camera, and the place just absolutely pops because of it, which was excellent. Again, shame that we never got to. I still think that Eddie Guerrero, like, even though we all know how great it was, and I mean, if someone had a career and not passed as good as Eddie Guerrero's, it would still be good to end anybody's career where he had. Yeah. I still think there was think about what we could have had, had Eddie not passed, where he would be now in the wrestling industry. Where do you think? I think he probably would have hung it up by now, but Hall of Fame, have his own podcast, you know what I mean? I think, that it's without question. I think
part of me wonders, because he was so giving and he always wanted to give back. Mm-hmm. Part of me wonders if he would have remained on as like production or a coach in some aspect. I don't think he would have just retired and sailed off into the sunset. I think he'd still be involved.
Yeah, absolutely. It's no secret that Eddie and Benoit were like brothers. I think one of the saddest parts about watching the tribute show was just looking at Benoit's face. Did you witness a brotherhood between them?
Oh, for sure. They loved each other. Like it was a brotherly, I love you, man. Like truly, they cared about each other. They would have died for each other. They would have stepped in front of a bullet for the other person.
So it's amazing. It's amazing because I think you can always tell what's real sometimes when you're watching something on TV, and you always just kind of knew as well, because Eddie and Chris came over with Dean Malenko and Perry Saturn. Did Eddie and Chris ever talk much about the Radical days? Would they kind of just dropped off at that point?
No, I don't. Eddie they would tell stories about. It would be like funny locker room stories and stuff like that. Ribs and stuff like that. They pull on people. I remember like Chris telling me this story that Booker T had just started in the business or had just come to WCW, and Booker was like super hungry. I've heard both these guys like standing next to each other telling their versions of the story too. It's hilarious. Booker had gone to concessions and gotten 3 hot dogs with mustard on them, and he put them in his little cubicle in the locker room, in his locker, that I'm going to have after my match. And he went out, he came back, and the fucking hot dogs are gone. And he said, who took my hot dog? Anybody see my hot dogs? And Chris had put like a little bit of mustard right here on his. And he was, I haven't seen him, man. I don't know. Hot dogs. I mean, Eddie or Booker is like, okay, man, they're testing me. I'm gonna have to fight him. He was like gearing himself up for that sort of thing. But then Then Chris pulled him out. He had just hidden him somewhere else.
Well, there's nothing. There's things you don't mess with. A man's money, a man's wife, and a man's food. You know,
especially the hot bars.
So no, it's definitely a crime when it comes to that. On the day of Eddie's passing, obviously we're not going to ask a lot of questions that have already been asked at people. I know Chris covered that day, but kind of things that go through my head is like, so you walk into the arena, and I've myself walked into a workplace where someone has passed, and there's definitely a blanket of just somber sadness that you automatically you inhale it the minute you walk into a building. What did Vince McMahon address you guys backstage? I mean, what does that day look like? You know, if you've just found out, you walk in there.
I don't recall seeing much of Vince that day. It was just, it was sort of like word of mouth. Hey, they had a photography, like a setup where you could go and just pay tribute to Chris. And some people did, which ended up being used on TV, and some people did, and it never got used. But there wasn't a whole lot of Vince from what I recall that day. It was just like, it was, I think Vince was probably reliving what happened with Owen to some degree, right? This horrible thing happened. What do I do? Because the show is supposed to go on, but do I? And ultimately, at the end of the day, I think Eddie would have wanted the show to go on. I think, yeah. But it was definitely a dark, weird day. Everybody was affected by it. There was a lot of tears, lots and lots of tears.
Do you, like, when you look back on it, is there specific memories of, just, I don't know, some people, when something like that happens, are like, oh, I just remember, sitting drinking a coffee or something. Is there something that sticks out to you that whenever you think about that, you relate it to it straight away? A specific smell, a specific song?
No, I just I talked about it with Chris on his podcast, and really the reality was like it caught me off guard because I hadn't talked about that in a while, and it was just this selfish feeling. I'm like, I don't want to be selfish, but my dad is sick and he's dying and he's never seen me before. But the entire show got scrapped and it turned into an Eddie tribute, and now I have to go to Vince and hey man, like explain the situation to him, and right away he was like, I got you, like, and he put me in a match with Val Venus, which I think was non-televised, but at least my dad was able to see me in that environment.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I just remember everybody being like super, super kind to my dad that day. Ric Flair. The one time I did see Vince, he came out and sat and talked to my dad for a while.
That's amazing.
Genuinely, I didn't feel like my dad was, sometimes you get those like charity cases where like, hey, are you okay, little buddy? Kind of that kind of thing. And it didn't feel like that at all. It was like,
do you feel like Vince maybe related? Because I know that he was quite close with his dad. I think maybe he could proper put himself in the shoes. Do you recall the last words or the last conversation that you and Eddie had?
The week before, so going into the match, we were in Indianapolis, and going into that match, Eddie was like, I worked him a few times, and he didn't like to call things. He didn't like to plan out a bunch of spots. We would call some things, some transitions, like if there was a break where we needed to go to commercial break, we'd call that just so that the producers have something to work off of, like, hey, we're going to commercial break now, having cues and things like that. But I remember we didn't really plan much out. He did say, when you hit me with that chair, bring it, hit it, like swing it. All right, yes, sir, I will. And I know I hit him with it, and then I came back to the curtain, and he was kind of sitting on a trainer's table, and he was like, maybe a little too much, Holmes. Like, oh my, so sorry. Like, and it's okay, but maybe a little less, you know. And yeah, and then we went out to eat that night. It was Chris, Eddie, and Kevin Fertig and I, who was wrestling as Seven, but he was the vampire. What was the vampire thing? Was it Kevin
Thorne?
Kevin
Mordecai. It was first.
Right. Yep. He was Seven when he was in OVW, and then he got pulled up as Mordecai, which was kind of the anti-Undertaker, which never took off for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was Kevin Thorne in ECW. We went out to a really nice steakhouse, and those guys were like, because after Raw, then the next time we would meet would be in Minneapolis it was like a Raw SmackDown ECW combined show. And then everybody was going to the airport. We were jumping on a flight. We were heading over to Italy, I think was our first stop on overseas tour. And they were like, this is your first overseas tour, man. We're going to fuck with you a little bit. Don't drink too much. You're going to get your eyebrows shaved off. Stuff like that. They were telling me stories about things that had happened to other people on past overseas tours. And, they were just kind of like, they were having fun with it. They were also like, it's going to be a lot of fun. You're going to love going overseas. The crowds overseas are going to be insane, which they were at the time. WWE hadn't been to Italy in ever, I think. And it was really, really popular there. So I remember driving into the first venue, and they were rocking the buses as we were pulling in. It was like crazy stuff you see on TV. But
it does.
Did I answer your question?
Yeah, of course. I can speak for the overseas crowds. We have to stay up to 1 a.m. before that's Raw, SmackDown starting at 1 a.m. So we need to stay up to enjoy that, and we don't get PLEs, pay-per-views. We don't get that. So when we do, we like to let you know that we're hungry for it and keep doing it.
And come back, please come back.
100%, because we almost like to let you know that we're here. I will finish this part on this one last question before we actually get over to your words of wisdom and talk a wee bit about your school before we wrap up the show. But I think the biggest takeaway for you, really, how valuable was riding with Chris and Eddie to your career?
It was. I can't put a price tag on it. And if anybody is starting out in the business, if anybody is freshly called up to the active roster, I encourage you to do the same thing. Get in the car with some veterans, even if you're an independent wrestler, and some guys from your school are working a show 3 hours away. Like, ask them, can I jump in the car with you guys? Because there's just so much you can learn. And again, it's not about the moves. It's about the stuff we do in between the moves. And that's really where we talk about the little stuff.
That's amazing. So we're going to try every week to wrap up the show with some words of wisdom, because we know you as Mr. Kennedy, we know you as Mr. Anderson, but what people may not be aware of is that you train the next generation. You have your own school at the Academy Pro Wrestling. Can you maybe, in a nutshell, tell the people watching at home what it takes to become a wrestler? And for someone like me who watches wrestling and thinks, you can't go to school to learn to be a wrestler. At least maybe 20, 30 years ago, that was the case. Now you can. So what type of, I think anybody could essentially become a wrestler, given the right set of tools.
Yeah. Yep.
So kind of tell us a little bit about that.
We train at the academy. We train literally all walks of life. I feel personally that if you love the business and you feel like you want to contribute, whether that's as a referee or a manager or a promoter or a wrestler, if you love the business, you want to contribute, there's something for you to do. And I think you should do that. You should go and find a reputable wrestling school in your area or relocate and make it happen. There's a bunch of great wrestling schools out there today. And it's way different than it was just before I got into business. I was lucky because I didn't go through all the hazing and that stuff, but like, Greg Gagne has come and trained at the academy. Wow. And Wayne Bloom has trained at the academy, and all of those guys are still have that like old school mindset of like bump, 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 bump them until they. And Billy Gunn has told me that whatever school he went to, they bumped the shit out of those guys, and their intentions were that you would quit. Like they would bump you so much, and you'd be in so much pain that only a few people would survive. And Billy was one of those guys that was like, I love it. So, didn't affect him. And those were the people that they were looking for. The business has evolved. Things have changed now. Some people hate that just anybody can get into the business nowadays. I don't know. I think I've personally seen a bunch of people who had that mentality where I just bumped the shit out of them. And, some of these people had 2 left feet, 3 left feet. And had I done that and run them off, today, one of those guys is a pretty seasoned referee in the Midwest scene. He's like a great referee, and we wouldn't have been able to have his presence at these wrestling shows doing a great job refereeing and contributing. So, find yourself a great school. Doesn't necessarily have to be somebody that's made it to the WWE, but they should at least know what they're talking about. Yeah. I think with social media being what it is, it's pretty hard to get away with being a scumbag nowadays. Pretty hard to like just take people's money.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Totally. And you've got graduates, the likes of Darius Martin, Dante Martin, and Tiffany Stratton, which I'm sure we'll do a full episode on. I mean, she's killing it right now. If you need any other type of convincing, like she's the women's world champion right now in WWE. Like, it speaks for itself, right?
It does. I will say this, and there's no shame in me saying this, that I think Tiffany would be successful whether she had gone to my school or she had gone to somebody else's school. She's just that. She's like a very unique, special person. I'm happy that I was able to have a hand in that. I believe that I was able to show her some things. But yeah, I can't take credit and say like, oh, I taught her everything she knows.
No, but you're part of her journey. If she writes a book, there definitely has to be a chapter with you in it. And if that's not,
at least a paragraph.
So humble. but it is excellent. Is there any what's one thing you've seen on TV right now that you don't like to see from wrestlers that are not seasoned? What tip can you give to upcoming wrestlers that you don't want to see?
I see, I guess, like a few months ago, Anastasia and I went to a SmackDown taping that was here at the Target Center in Minneapolis. And it was the first time that it was literally I think the second time in my life that I went and watched as a fan, not as, you know, and I wasn't in the building as an employee, in the crowd actually watching. And there were some things that I saw where people weren't taking their time letting things register, right? Like if a crowd makes noise, like all it takes is just to stop for a second and let it digest before you move on. And I think people have a tendency, and I asked, one of the things I saw was there was a lot of mistakes being made. And it's a live product, right? Raw and SmackDown are both live. PLEs are live. I asked somebody, I said, why is that? And the response was that, like, basically everybody is green. When I started, when I was there, like I said, I gave you that list before: Booker T, Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, Bob Holly, Undertaker, Kane, Batista, Rey Mysterio, you know, all these names of people that would take you under their wing and sort of guide you and help you. You don't have that right now. You've got 3-year vets in the ring with 3-year vets. And it's not their fault. You know, it's nothing that they've done. You don't know what you don't know. So wish I would see a little more blending of old and new. I think it's a really good formula for success.
Absolutely. And speaking of formulas for success, this show is a formula for success. And I would like to see it grow, just as everybody likes to see the show. So if you're watching this, which you are, please go ahead and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, X, everywhere possible, because, you know, the idea of this show is that we get to take Mr. Anderson and put him right front and center and allow the so many people that loved watching your career that still love listening to you now, and connect that dot. So the best way to do that is by following us, hit the subscribe button, and make sure to look out for the mailbag as well every week, because we want to hear questions from you guys. We do have so many good shows coming up, shows that we've discussed that we will drop hints to very soon. Every show essentially will have its long form conversation, but they're going to be live. We're going to do live streams, Patreon coming up. There'll be yourself and your wife Anastasia like to game. So imagine you're playing Dead by Daylight with Mr. Anderson. You know what I mean? I think there'll be multiplayer opportunities. I know that we're looking forward to it. Before we go, how does it feel to be out there again, Ken, and really be able to connect with everybody that really wants to show their support?
It feels really good, honestly. I have fallen in and out of love with wrestling several times throughout my career, and I really, truly, I'm back in love with the game, with the business. I'm really happy that you guys reached out to us and presented this and laid it on the table. I'm really looking forward to, taking this to the moon.
Absolutely. And that's the next stop, so to speak. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'll say that to you every week because I take nothing for granted. This is amazing for us to be able to speak to you every week and pick your brain, and we're wrestling fans at the end of the day, but we also speak for everybody that's tuning in. So make sure you're liking these videos, put your comments below, and we'll definitely bring them up, and we're really looking forward to episode 2.
Looking forward to episode number 2. Hey, the pleasure is all yours.
It's good to be seen.